PowerPoint. Mr. Glazer had just done the first 25 slides. I'm going to go back a couple slides here and pick up here on slide 23 in day 2. So you should have your study guides out. Again, this is Mr. Maloney. Hope you're all staying safe. Hope you're washing your hands and trying to stay as healthy as possible during this pandemic. So study guides should be out, and you could take notes if you want, or just answer the questions as we go along and try to learn a little bit about the collapse of some of these imperial powers here throughout the world here. So the collapse of European imperialism in mostly Africa right now is what we're dealing with today. So here we go. Independent nations of Africa. We see Pan-Africanism that was emphasized, the unity of all people of African descent throughout the world. Most African nations achieved self-rule, such as independence, after World War II. We started to see more urbanization throughout Africa than had occurred when they were imperialized. So we're starting to see some urbanization, but most of Africa is still struggling and falling behind at this point. Here's the Pan-African flag of the Pan-African movement. The red stands for the blood that unites all the people of African ancestry. The black represents the color of the skin of the people of Africa, and the green stands for the rich land of Africa. So that is the Pan-African flag. It's just a unity movement trying to get all the African people together on board to create a great continent for the African people. Early independence movements in Africa. Ghana, a former British colony on the Gold Coast, as you can see over there on the slide here. Here's Ghana over here. Over here on the Gold Coast, or this is where a lot of the slave trade was, over on this part of Africa. They got their independence in 1957, and there is the flag of Ghana right there on that PowerPoint. So let's slide on down a little bit. The first prime minister of Ghana was Kwame Nkrumah. Oh, so he's the first prime minister. He created the OAU, the Organization of African Unity. He used Pan-Africanism, so trying to bring all the African people together through Pan-Africanism, and he used that movement to end British imperialism, and that's what made him a hero there. Kwame Nkrumah became a hero in Ghana for this. And here's just some pictures of Kwame Nkrumah. There's just a billboard here. We face neither east nor west. We face forward. There's no place like Africa. So having pride in Africa. Just trying to gain their independence, these people. Kenya. Now to Kenya. The #1 export of Kenya is coffee. They got their independence in 1963 from Britain. Their first leader, Jomo Kenyatta, led an independence movement and became Kenya's first prime minister. Kenya is over here on the other side of Africa, over here. Ghana was on the west coast. This is going to be on the east coast of Africa. And there's the flag of Kenya over there. Kenya is a beautiful country with a lot of people like to go on safaris in Kenya. They have a lot of great wildlife and wild animals there to go visit. There is Jomo Kenyatta right there, and there's the map of Kenya and their capital, Nairobi. Algeria. Algeria got their independence in 1962 from France. There's a Muslim majority there. Many bloody wars for independence with France here before they got that freedom in 1962. Today, there's open immigration with France. So people from Algeria, as it's considered like an open land, or territory of France, they have open borders. So people from Algeria can simply just go into France, and France can go into Algeria. Terrorism is an issue there, as there are some terrorist groups in Algeria. So with open immigration, these terrorists can move freely from Algeria into France, and then they can get into Europe. So that's been an issue. There is the Algerian flag right there, and there is the map of Algeria. Economic links with Europe. These African nations are still tied to an imperial economy. They export raw materials for profit, like cash crops, and they must import their food. So they grow a lot of cash crops. Cash crops are crops that you can't eat. They make money. They help you make money, but you can't eat them, like tobacco, or you can't eat coffee. So they have to import their food. This becomes more expensive, especially when the cost of the crops that they're sending out is more than the cost of the food that they bring in. So that becomes a big issue in the country. So that can lead to problems, especially when you got to feed your people. So a lot of these countries would be better off if they grew more of their own food instead of having to import their food. Problems when prices of that crop fall, like I just talked about. Rising debt, there's few factories, no industrialization, not enough jobs. These African countries are still developing nations. And if you don't know the difference here, developing nations and developed nations, there's a difference. We used to call developing nations third world countries. So developed nations are nations like Japan, the United States, Britain, France, Germany, those countries, Russia. They have factories, they have jobs, they have a huge economy where they can feed all their people. Um, Developing nations don't have that. They don't have all these big marketplaces, these mega stores, these mega industries. People are fighting for food for their daily life. A lot of people in the United States might be in a fight to keep their house or to keep their job or whatever, but in these developing nations, they are simply fighting for survival, so to speak. They're trying to get enough food to eat. And then we see ethnic tensions and nationalism. So after imperialism, many tribes are separated into many countries, and we see tribal loyalty and not loyalty to the new country. So that becomes a big issue when you change boundaries, but the people are not all bought in and they stay in their tribes and not uniting with their country. And we see this especially in Nigeria. Nigeria is very rich in oil. They're a member of OPEC today. They have over 200 ethnic groups there. So a lot of different tribal loyalties there. They've had a civil war on again, off again for many, many years there. Millions have died. It is still dangerous now and from time to time in Nigeria as these ethnic groups are waging wars against each other. The hate from one group to another is astounding. Rwanda. Rwanda, this is a big one here. It's a former Belgian colony. They had a genocide there in 1994, and it was just a shocking atrocity that happened in human history. The Hutus versus the Tutsis. Hutus, 85% of Rwanda are Hutu. They have darker complexion. They are all African, and they are typically shorter. Those are the traits of the Hutus. The Tutsis are 14% of the Rwandan population. They have a lighter skin color. They are mixed African and European, and they are taller. In 1994, up to 1 million of the Tutsis were killed in 3 months. 1 million killed in 3 months in this genocide where the Hutus were trying to take out the Tutsis. So here, slide 37, we're on here. Long ago, Rwanda and Burundi were one nation, as you can see on the map right there. Rwanda right here, and Burundi right underneath it. Rwanda on top, Burundi right underneath it. In the heart of Africa, Rwanda and Burundi were one nation. The Hutu and Tutsi lived there peacefully together. Then, again, this is just a little review of what the Hutus and Tutsis are. So the Hutus were the majority, around 85%, but they were considered commoners. The Tutsis were minority population, but they were considered the elite ruling class because of their large estates, large number of servants, and a large number of cattle. So even though they were the minority, they were the ones in charge. They were the ruling class. So we talked about this already, the physical appearance, because the Hutus and Tutsis did not usually intermarry. Their offspring began to develop similarities in their features. So the Tutsis were often very tall, thin, with narrow features and fair skin. The Hutus were often shorter, stronger, with broader features, darker skin, like their noses were a little bit wider. So people could tell the difference between who a Hutu and a Tutsi were by just looking at them. So this is a picture from the movie Hotel Rwanda, which we've been watching. The man on the right plays a Hutu character, and he's the star of the movie. And the woman on the left plays a Tutsi character right here. So you can see he's got like a wider nose. She has a skinnier nose, and that's in lighter skin, and she is a Tutsi. So warning. Human rights groups warn the international community of an impending genocide. In March of 1994, the human rights groups are forced to flee Rwanda due to the impending calamity. Only the Red Cross stays behind. So all of these other groups that watch out and protect people, they left for fear of their people dying. And the world just kind of let this genocide happen, even though there were warnings that this was going to happen. Nobody really was able to step in and stop this from happening. So the UN is forced to leave. The UN is forced to leave for a variety of reasons, including increased violence in Rwanda and world tensions following a crisis that occurred in Somalia. And to make a long story short, the United States got involved in Somalia, and it was called Black Hawk Down. We had gone into Somalia to try to stop some Somalian rebels from hurting people there and committing a genocide. And in doing so, they had weapons. They shot down one of our helicopters. They killed some American military people and almost brought us into a war there. So the UN noticed this, and they didn't want this to happen here in Rwanda as well. So that led people to leaving here. Here are some pictures from the genocide. There's like a machete and some of the bullets. And here's a stack of machetes that were confiscated. They were able to import these machetes in from China for like a dime each, give them to the Hutus, and the Hutus would go and brutally murder the Tutsis. So, I mean, it was sad and scary. They went through there and they basically broke people's skulls and bones and faces, and they cut them up pretty good. So it's not the best way to go. I mean, this was a brutal genocide. And here's some of the skulls. You can see, like, you get some broken bones in the middle of the skulls here. Sad. Stacks of more skulls. Lots of them with holes in their skull from being beaten and bashed in. Here's a wanted sign showing people wanted for genocide. And the reward of $5 million. Here's a man who survived. His face got cut up pretty good by those machetes. Sad, sad story. Here's more pictures, helicopter flying over, dead bodies and skulls. It's just gruesome to see all these people that were killed. And here, this is the beginning of the final days. This is the apocalypse. A quote from a resident of Goma, Zaire, as he sees all these people that were brutally murdered in this horrible genocide. The death toll: in the span of 100 days, an estimated 1 million Tutsis were slaughtered. They were killed primarily with knives, machetes, and clubs. 100,000, 1 out of every 10 of these were children. And Mr. Glazer will pick up with this in the next segment of the PowerPoint. Hope you guys are doing well. Continue to do your PowerPoint. Get the PowerPoint from my website. Answer the questions in the study guide. Submit those to me, preferably in Schoology. If you can't get in there, though, you can email it to me, take a picture of it, send it in there. But get that work in so you can get your credit. If you have any questions, just feel free to email me or Mr. Glazer. We'd greatly appreciate that. Stay safe and stay healthy.